A virtual world emerges, where chaos reigns as players loot and slaughter like characters in a real-life GTA simulation. The leader of a prestigious and well-known guild, called the Knights of Glory, Master Devea, receives a secretive report from a spy about a deadly assassin named Wright. One guild member mentions that unleashing assassins before launching an attack is a common strategy. However, Devea warns that this assassin is no ordinary foe. His power is overwhelming, and they must give their all to stand a chance. Suddenly, Devea notices a flock of birds flying directly toward them, and urgently commands the guild members to shoot them down. The guild, however, scoffs at the idea, dismissing it as a waste of time. But these are no ordinary birds. They are mechanical creations controlled by Wright, and they strike back fiercely against the guild. A massive explosion erupts, leaving Master Devea as its sole victim, her body charred and broken like overcooked meat. Her comrades cry out her name in anguish. In a miraculous twist, Devea resurrects, surrounded by radiant magic circles swirling around her body. She explains that her revival is thanks to a sacrificial magical artifact she wears around her neck. This rare artifact sacrifices itself to prevent its bearer's death, granting her another chance at life. Wright's cunning becomes evident, and the guild realizes how dangerous he truly is. Devea cautions them about the artifact's cooldown period and warns against underestimating their enemy. Moments later, Devea notices something unusual on the ground, but before she can react, a second explosion engulfs her in flames. Severely weakened, she collapses, only to be crushed by a falling pillar. With her last breath, Devea wonders how explosives could have been planted in the building. Could this all be Wright's meticulous design, planned since the building's construction? Meanwhile, one of Wright's mechanical birds returns to his hidden headquarters and informs him that the explosion was no ordinary detonation. It was caused by a magical energy injection device, a deadly tool of his own making. The bird then delivers a letter to Wright, congratulating him on a successful mission and rewarding him with a gold bar. Wright reflects on the science of explosions, noting that conventional blasts only affect the first 5 meters of depth. Beyond that, the Earth absorbs the force, neutralizing the impact, unless magic is involved. His magical device, however, channels energy explosively even with minimal input, shattering conventional limitations. He muses that, no matter how skilled an assassin, there will always be countermeasures devised against them. Yet, to Wright, it doesn't matter. He thrives on finding new ways to assassinate, constantly innovating his craft. His chosen profession, production job, focuses on creation. But in real life, Wright is a failure, a man lost in the shadows of his mundane existence. Turning to the VRMO game, Virtual Life Online, VLO, he reinvents himself as a master assassin to escape his bleak reality. In VLO, death carries serious consequences, losing a level and being banned from logging in for 3 days. For high-level players, losing a level is catastrophic, equivalent to wasting 100 hours of effort. Developers show no mercy, imposing even harsher penalties such as long-term bans. In guild battles, losing key members can doom a guild to failure, and many guilds have disbanded after critical losses during territorial wars. Player deaths are rare in VLO, often resulting only in unconsciousness requiring revival at a town. Only the most formidable bosses and select players possess the ability to kill outright, and frequent death marks a player as incompetent. Top guilds regularly hire assassins for their battles, making clashes between these elite killers a common sight. Among assassins, Wright stands out, infamous to all but his family. He's not a typical killer with flashy swordplay. Instead, he specializes in poisons and explosives, crafting destruction itself. Aware of his limitations in direct combat, Wright avoids it entirely, relying on tactics with no countermeasure. In the assassin's world, a 15% success rate is impressive, yet Wright boasts a staggering 99.9%. With over 1,000 missions under his belt and only one failure, Wright confidently claims the highest success rate in VLO. One day, as Wright strolls through the city, he receives an unusual letter. It's from a player named Goddess Mises, requesting his assistance. Skeptical, Wright questions its authenticity, since names with God or 69 are banned in VLO. Convinced it's a hoax, he brushes off the mysterious letter, its sender a potential prankster. Although he doubted her existence, Wright decided to search for Goddess Mises, reasoning that if she were real, he would eventually hear her voice. To his surprise, the device connected, and he heard her voice loud and clear. Rate asked her directly how she could use a name containing the word God, and if the system had removed the ban. Goddess Mises explained that she had the name because she was an actual god and the creator of the game. With admin privileges, she could use any name, even God Slayer 69. Rate was skeptical, thinking her claim to be the game's creator was delusional and far-fetched. Still intrigued, he asked for details about the mission. Mises explained it was to assassinate a god from another world named Masura Zul. Rate, confident in his encyclopedic knowledge of powerful players, noted he had never heard the name and concluded the target would be an easy mark. All he needed was the target's location. Ever the professional, Rate immediately asked about the mission reward and requested payment in gold. Mises agreed, offering an astonishing reward of 1,000 tons of pure gold. Being perpetually broke, Rate found the offer unbelievable and thought it might be a joke. He asked her to confirm if she was serious, and Mises assured him that the reward was genuine. She explained that the gold's value was equivalent to 5 million yen, but she would deliver it on the other side of the world. Still unconvinced, Rate wondered when Mises would wake up from her fantasy. However, curiosity got the better of him, and with a sly grin, he decided to accept the mission. Mises expressed relief, thanking him and admitting that if he hadn't agreed, she would have considered herself doomed. Rate dismissed her melodrama, thinking it was just a game. Mises, however, insisted that this was far from an ordinary game. Suddenly, Rate noticed the teleportation stone activating on its own. This startled him, as teleportation stones never worked without a manual trigger. As the magic enveloped him, Mises informed him that she lacked the time to explain and would send the target to him immediately. Rate protested, needing time to prepare since he was vulnerable in close combat and required intel to plan countermeasures. Mises explained that he could not bring any foreign items with him, rendering his poisons and explosives useless. She added that the teleportation stone would transport him to another world, a concept Rate struggled to grasp. Nevertheless, Mises believed Rate was the perfect choice for the mission, as his unique skills would prove invaluable. She revealed that his target was Masura Zul, the evil god and the last remaining deity in that world. Rate found himself in a sprawling green meadow, his hand touching the soft ground as he surveyed the lush forest, teeming with wildlife. He attempted to use GPS to determine his location. Opening his item box, he was shocked to find it empty. It dawned on him that Mises wasn't joking about leaving all foreign items behind. Rate wandered through the forest, noting its uncanny resemblance to the landscapes in VLO, yet the level of detail was far sharper and more realistic than any game could achieve. This realization made him start believing Mises' claim that he had been transported to another world. Just then, Mises' voice echoed through the communication device, apologizing for teleporting him to the wrong location due to her weakened powers. She explained that the dwindling number of her followers had severely diminished her strength, leaving her unable to fully control the process. Gods, she said, draw their power from the faith of their believers. Rate began to understand that even being a god wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. Mises continued, revealing that all other gods had been destroyed by Masura Zul. Rate pieced it together. He had been summoned by a desperate goddess in her final moments to eliminate her rival. He asked the obvious question, were Mises and Masura Zul truly the only gods left? Mises confirmed this grim reality, adding that Masura Zul's followers actively eradicated other gods' disciples, either killing them or forcing them to convert. Suddenly, the holographic image of Mises flickered and began to fade as her energy to maintain contact ran out. Rate panicked, begging her not to abandon him in this eerie forest. Her voice became fragmented, but her final words promised that she would reward him once her strength returned. Left alone, Rate felt like discarded trash, but accepted his situation with surprising calm. Instead of despair, he found the mission intriguing and decided to embrace the challenge. Prioritizing his safety, he resolved to establish a secure base before hunting his target. He roamed the forest, but found no sign of civilization. Although he couldn't bring items from VLO, he discovered that he could still use basic game skills. Activating his enemy detection skill, he identified several monsters nearby, classifying them as medium threats. The forest was anything but safe. Using magic, he conjured pure water, and realized that if magic worked, his production skills would too. This revelation gave him hope, convincing him he could carve out a comfortable life in this unfamiliar world. Rate realized he needed to gather resources fast if he didn't want to end up as monster food. His first priority was finding metal. After searching the forest, he discovered a deposit of bauxite. This wasn't Minecraft, so he had to mine and craft everything by hand. Placing 2 fingers on the bauxite block, Rate activated his extraction skill, yielding about 500 grams of pure aluminum. Using his shape-shifting ability, he crafted the aluminum into a needle. While it didn't deal much damage, Rate found a way to strengthen it. He picked a poisonous plant called Death Root and extracted its venomous sap, applying it to the needle's tip to create a makeshift weapon. However, he knew this weapon wouldn't be effective against stronger monsters. He tried accessing his item box and checking his stats, but the system completely ignored him. The status panel didn't appear, confirming this world was far removed from the VLO game. Moreover, he had no items, making it impossible to assess his strength accurately. The only way to gauge his abilities was to test his skills. He activated the martial arts skill Crush Kick and obliterated a tree trunk. This was a reliable measure of his power, and he realized his offensive capabilities remained as strong as in VLO. He assumed his stats in this world mirrored those in the game. As night fell, Rate decided to construct a house. He used his shape-shifting ability to create an aluminum saw, cutting logs and arranging them into triangular shapes. Despite his spaghetti-like arms, he managed to dig a foundation, preparing for construction. But Rate wasn't one for boring manual labor. With the aid of magic, he built a house in mere minutes. Once finished, he stepped inside, taking in the scent of fresh wood. But the house was far too big for one person, a space fit for a grand party, yet missing the most crucial thing: friends. Determined, Rate decided to gather more food and, more importantly, seek out magic stones. He wanted to create artifacts powered by these stones to cast various spells. Unfortunately, magic stones could only be harvested from monsters and only through manual extraction. Resolving to hunt, he prepared for the task. The aluminum he'd gathered wasn't enough for a proper melee weapon, and the poison needles would spoil the prey's flesh. So, he opted for a wooden bow. Using his shape-shifting skill, he transformed a piece of wood into a sturdy bow frame. He then needed a bowstring, which wasn't easy to craft. Rate extracted fibers from tree trunks. While still elastic, he wove them into threads and braided them for extra durability. After an intricate process, the bow was complete. He crafted additional arrows using leftover aluminum. Fully equipped, Rate ventured into the forest and used his detection skill to locate enemies. He found one at 2 o'clock. Climbing onto a tree branch, he posed like a seasoned archer, ready for action. Ahead, he spotted a large frog resting on a rock and wondered if it was edible. Rate fired an arrow, which struck the frog's side. However, the shot wasn't lethal. The enraged frog identified the source and leapt towards the tree. It jumped alarmingly high, nearly reaching the branch where Rate stood, but he vanished, seemingly taunting. "Not this time, buddy." Rate reappeared beneath the frog, in the perfect position to deliver a fatal shot. Despite multiple arrows piercing its body, the frog stubbornly prepared a final counterattack. It lashed its slimy tongue at Rate, but he launched a precise arrow straight at its uvula. As the arrow hit, he quipped, "If one shot isn't enough, just keep shooting until it is." With the monster defeated, Rate returned home, pondering how to prepare the frog meat. He decided to cook it, noting its taste was surprisingly similar to chicken. Yet, he mused that the wildlife might be driving him mad, as the food seemed unusually delicious. This meal marked a turning point, making survival feel effortless. However, monster frog meat was dangerous due to its 10 poison sacs. Carefully avoiding them, he ensured the meat remained uncontaminated. In the end, he retrieved a magic stone, Mana Stone, from the frog. Judging by the monster's strength, this stone was particularly powerful. It promised to be incredibly useful to him. Now, Rate had food, a magic stone, and a successful hunt under his belt. His ultimate goal loomed ahead, to defeat the evil god, Masur Azul. Yet, doubts lingered about the god's true nature, and he never fully trusted the goddess Mises to begin with. Rayat no longer cared about anything else. He had accepted a contract with the goddess Mises, and his mission was clear: destroy the target without question. Minutes later, he decided to craft artifacts using magic stones he acquired from the grotesque frog. He sat down and resolved to create an artifact capable of detecting magic. His memory of the crafting process was vague, and the materials at hand were far from ideal. Despite this, he decided to proceed. Using his transformation skill, Rate created a tool. This tool resembled a magical hammer, designed to infuse magic into raw materials. He began tapping the metal surface with it. The artifact creation process officially commenced. The artifact Rate was crafting would detect magic, specifically sources of magical energy used to cast spells. Rate knew that animals and monsters could possess magic, but this artifact would only respond to human spellcasting, activating when nearby magic was used. After continuous hammering, a spike emerged at the tip of the rectangular metal plate. It functioned as an antenna to enhance the artifact's sensitivity. The artifact's quality relied entirely on the strength of the magic stones and the spearhead used in its creation. Rate chose not to use his transformation skill for the spearhead. Instead, he carefully infused it with magic and layered enchantments. He knew that transfiguration magic couldn't match the precision of blacksmithing and conjuration. Over time, the spearhead reached its limit, saturated with magic. This marked the maximum threshold the material could handle. Deciding the artifact was complete, Rate chanted the spells Bind and Bestow. With these final incantations, the magic detector was finished. Rate estimated that the detector could sense magic within a 1-kilometer radius. To test it, he used magic to fill a glass with pure water. The detector immediately reacted, confirming its functionality. Satisfied, Rate sipped the water and admired his work. But soon, a loud growl from his stomach reminded him it was dinner time. Rate skewered the frog meat he had collected earlier and set it over the firewood to grill. Sitting by the fire, he attempted to use the forge fire skill to light the flames. However, the effort left him drained of mana. To conserve energy, he decided to use only the bare minimum of magic. Moments later, the fire roared to life, and the meat began to cook. Though tempted to eat immediately, Rate chose to leave the meat on the flames a little longer. He silently hoped the meal wouldn't cause stomach trouble, as he hadn't yet built a toilet and dreaded an embarrassing accident. Then, inspiration struck. He decided to enhance the meal with a touch of salt. Once the meat was cooked and seasoned, Rate gently blew on it to cool it down and took his first bite. To his surprise, the salt made a world of difference. Frog meat, which he thought would taste bland, turned out to be rich and flavorful. After finishing the meal, Rate contemplated what to do with the remaining meat. He considered preserving it, but realized he'd need magic stones to build a refrigerator or freezer. That meant battling more monsters, which he wasn't in the mood for. Reluctantly, he decided to store the meat in his item box, though he feared it might spoil. Aware of the risks, Rate placed the meat in the box anyway, telling himself he'd deal with the consequences later. With no mattress to sleep on, he lay on the wooden floor. As he rested, he realized he needed to search for others in this world. However, he feared they might attack him due to his hideous appearance. Knowing he couldn't venture out unprepared, he resolved to focus on brewing magic potions first. His previous battle without potions had been a nightmare he didn't want to repeat. The next morning, Rate emerged from his house, his back aching from sleeping on the hard floor. His new mission was clear: find a proper mattress. Wandering through the forest, he stumbled upon herbs he needed for potion making. Luckily, these plants grew near his house. The herb he found was Mias herb, a common plant ranked lowest among medicinal ingredients. Yet, with the right enchantments, it could produce level 2 potions. Rate harvested every Mias herb he could find. Once he had enough, he returned home to start brewing potions. He crushed the herbs, infusing them with magic as he worked. He then mixed the sap with water and placed it over the stove to boil. As the mixture bubbled, Rate awkwardly waited. After a long process, he successfully brewed a level 2 potion, feeling pleased with his efforts. Though level 2 potions were weak compared to the level 11 potions crafted by top players in VLO, they were better than nothing. Still, Rate wished he could brew level 4 potions, but decided to save that task for another day. He realized he'd overlooked an essential detail: containers for the potions. Using his transformation skill, he quickly fashioned a set of flasks. He filled 5 bottles with the potion, confident they would prove useful in future battles. Finished with his task, Rate stepped outside, determined to hunt monsters and gather more magic stones. Using his enemy detection skill, he scanned the area for threats. He fought every monster he encountered, collecting a substantial number of magic stones for crafting. The first artifact he decided to make was a flash grenade. He began by using magic to crush one of the stones. Though it felt wasteful, breaking the stone was necessary to create the grenade. Rate pulverized the stone until it became fine powder, mana fragments. The next step was to infuse the fragments with magic. However, even when charged, each fragment only emitted a faint light for a brief moment. Rate knew that by combining hundreds of thousands of these fragments, he could create an intense, blinding flash. Since the powder couldn't be used in its raw form, Rate used his fusion skill to mold the powder into a solid container. Feeling unsafe with only one flash grenade, he decided to craft 3 for extra assurance. He worked tirelessly, grinding more magic stones until dawn. By morning, his work was finally complete. Despite the sleepless night, crafting the grenades was much easier than producing high-tier items. Suddenly, his magic detector started signaling repeatedly, which confused Rate as he wasn't using magic at the time. He quickly realized someone nearby was casting magic. Grabbing his magic detector and bow, Rate dashed toward the source of the magic. He had no idea whether the caster was a friend or a foe, but decided to investigate, suspecting it wasn't an ally. The magic detector pointed to the strongest magic signature, and Rate followed its guidance, activating his stealth skills to conceal his presence. As he approached, he heard desperate screams warning someone to run from danger. Using the cries as a guide, Rate pinpointed the location and crept closer. Perched on a tree branch, he observed a monstrous, hideous bear threatening a father and his children. Nearby, an injured man lay on the ground, while a stunningly beautiful teenage girl anxiously tended to him, pleading for his safety. The man clearly wasn't a warrior, and to make matters worse, a knight attempting to protect them had suffered a poisoned shoulder wound. Rate quickly deduced that unless he intervened, they would all perish within minutes. Without hesitation, he planned his attack and descended dramatically from the tree in a cool, superhero-like pose. The bear roared at the sight of Rate's terrifying face, but Rate ignored it and hurled his flash grenades, which erupted into a blinding light, creating the perfect moment for his counterattack. He immediately launched poisoned needles he had prepared earlier, but noticed the bear's resilience. It was far stronger than the monsters he had faced before. Poison needles alone wouldn't suffice. Rate increased the potency of the poison and converted the needles into a single poisoned arrow. Aiming his bow at the bear, he warned the teenage girl to stay still if she didn't want to risk taking over his task. He released the arrow, piercing the bear's back and sending it into a wild frenzy. The enraged bear lunged at Rate like a prizefighter, throwing powerful blows. But Rate dodged each attack with precision, biding his time as his plan unfolded perfectly. The arrow's poison was a blend of 3 deadly toxins. The first was a neurotoxin from deathroot, one of the deadliest substances in existence. The second was a hemorrhagic poison derived from lethal mushrooms, meant to kill creatures immune to neurotoxins. As the bear prepared to crush Rate, it suddenly froze mid-attack, its body paralyzed. Rate strode past the immobilized monster with an air of triumph, showing off his victory with a dramatic Power Rangers-style gesture. The final ingredient in the poison, a paralytic agent extracted from the venom of the frog monster he had slain earlier, sealed the bear's fate. This venom not only paralyzed the bear, but also dulled its brain activity, leaving it unaware of its imminent demise. When the survivor's vision cleared after the flash grenade's brilliance, they saw the massive bear lying lifeless and a mysterious, wiry figure standing victoriously before it. The wounded knight hesitantly asked if Rate was the one who had defeated the monster. Rate nodded, confirming his feat. He noted that since the knight could still move, the bear's poison likely worked slowly. However, the deep wound on the knight's chest was severe, and Rate predicted he might succumb to blood loss before the poison could fully spread. He approached to offer aid, but the knight stopped him, declaring that while Rate had saved their lives, he couldn't allow him to do more. Rate dismissed the knight's protest, stating that the injured man would die without immediate action. While tending to the man, Rate casually referred to him as Old Man, angering the knight, who declared the injured figure to be someone of great importance. Rate retorted that if he was so important, it was even more critical to save him. Reluctantly, the knight agreed to let Rate help. Rate assured them he couldn't guarantee success, but vowed to try his best. He handed the knight a potion and instructed the injured man to drink it. The knight examined the potion, sniffing, inspecting, and even tasting it to ensure it wasn't harmful. To prove its safety, Rate offered to drink any bottle the knight chose. The knight picked one at random, and Rate downed it without hesitation. This display earned the knight's trust. The teenage girl, determined to help, offered the potion to the injured man. Her father, who drank it. Almost instantly, his wounds began to heal, and his face regained its strength and surprising handsomeness. Everyone marveled at the potion's power and speculated whether Rate had crafted an advanced, high-tier remedy. However, Rate explained that the medicine he used was merely a basic level 2 potion. He was surprised by their amazement, thinking they might lack experience in medicine making. He then handed the soldier a recovery potion, urging him to drink it since he was also injured. The soldier humbly refused, claiming he was just an ordinary guard and the potion should be saved for someone more deserving. Rate scolded him, ordering him to stop talking and drink the potion immediately, assuring him he had plenty more. After drinking, the soldier admitted he owed Rate a debt. Rate reminded him that unless the bear's venom was dealt with, the medicine wouldn't be enough to save him. The soldier was shocked to learn that Rate could counteract the poison. Rate asked about the soldier's symptoms, and the soldier revealed only mild numbness in his fingers. Rate concluded that it was a paralytic poison, and warned that it would spread to his heart if untreated, leading to a slow death. Since crafting the antidote in the forest was impossible, Rate offered to bring them to his house to prepare the cure. The soldier carried the injured man on his back, and the group made their way to Rate's home. Upon entering, they were astonished to see such a well-maintained house in the wilderness. Rate dismissed their amazement, commenting that it still felt empty. He directed them to the living room while he prepared the antidote. Curious, the soldier asked if Rate was a doctor, given his knowledge of medicine. Rate replied that he wasn't an expert, just someone with many skills. Rate advised the soldier to learn the process of antidote making for his safety in the future. The soldier agreed, but requested a moment to settle the frail man in a bed. Later, Rate offered the soldier water, which he drank without hesitation. Rate asked about his condition, and the soldier nervously admitted that his entire arm was now paralyzed, fearing it might be too late. Rate reassured him, explaining that since the poison had only spread to the arm, there was still time to act. Though the herbs he had on hand were of poor quality, Rate believed that with careful preparation and a bit of creativity, he could still craft an effective antidote. Shortly after, he finished making the antidote, placing 2 bowls of the mixture in front of the soldier and Lumia. The soldier drank first to ensure it was safe. Immediately, his eyes widened in amazement as the numbness vanished without a trace. Rate urged the soldier to quickly administer the antidote to the older man, whose condition was dire. Lumia rushed to her father's side, giving him the medicine. His face regained color, and he appeared visibly younger and healthier. Rate informed them that he had neutralized the poison and treated the man's wounds. He assured them that with rest, the man would recover soon. Handing Lumia an emergency potion, Rate instructed her to save it for critical situations. With everyone stabilized, Rate suggested they talk. He wanted to know their identities and why they were in such a dangerous area. Lumia offered to explain, but asked Rate to wait until her father woke to share the details himself. The soldier introduced himself as Goldo, a royal guard of the Mythos kingdom. Lumia then revealed her identity as Princess Lumia Mythos, and introduced her father as Lias Mythos, the 14th king of Mythos. Though Rate typically avoided dealing with nobility, he recognized the gravity of this situation and decided to act cautiously. He pondered what his next move should be. Lumia pleaded with Rate to keep their identities and her father's royal status a secret. Rate agreed and decided to use an alias, introducing himself as Late, a name similar to his own. Late felt proud of his quick thinking and suggested they wait for the king to wake before making decisions. Lumia hesitantly asked if Late planned to help them further. Late realized they were in need of assistance. Flustered, Lumia quickly covered her mouth, realizing she had said too much, while Goldo glared at her in disappointment. Late decided to set the topic aside and suggested they eat together. Stepping outside, he retrieved monster frog meat from his inventory, surprised that it remained fresh, despite being stored for so long. He realized the storage box preserved food perfectly. Soon, he began grilling the meat over a fire. Curious, Lumia approached and asked what he was cooking. Late nonchalantly replied that it was monster frog meat, though he didn't know its exact name. Shocked at the idea of eating an unidentified monster, Lumia hesitated. Late reassured her they wouldn't be poisoned, as he had antidotes ready. Impressed by his logic, Lumia complimented him, which surprised Late, who had expected complaints about serving such a dish to royalty. At that moment, Goldo appeared, stepping between them like a martial artist and separating Lumia from Late. Goldo warned Lumia not to fall for Late's schemes, arguing that normal people didn't eat unknown monsters casually. Unfazed, Late continued enjoying the meal, commenting on the flavorful fat in the meat, which made it tender and delicious. Goldo confessed that they had no provisions and hastily admitted they were in a difficult situation. Late quickly understood, but chose to wait for the king to wake up for formal questioning. He offered Goldo the meat again, suggesting he test it for poison, sensing they still didn't fully trust him despite his help. Goldo agreed, taking the first bite. The dreary life of a royal bodyguard suddenly transforms into a fantastical dream for a bored, middle-aged man. A sunny beach day, with a beautiful woman chasing after him. Goldo praised Late's meat as delicious. Lumia then asked if she could try some of it, referring to the cooked dish, not the metaphor. Goldo nodded, as he had no objections to the dish. Just as Lumia was about to eat, she paused and thought, "Wait, I'm a princess." She then asked Late for a plate to eat from. Late swiftly used his transformation skill to conjure a plate from thin air, astonishing both Goldo and Lumia. Lumia took a bite, and her mind wandered into a dream similar to Goldo's flying helmet fantasy. But her vision was quite odd. She found herself in a bikini, enjoying a romantic moment with a strange frogman. A few minutes later, Late noticed Goldo had stopped eating and asked about it. Goldo explained that, as a royal guard, he should refrain from eating when food was scarce. Late reassured him there was more than enough meat for everyone, nothing suspicious. Goldo agreed instantly, adding that he felt indebted to Late more than Ivy League students were to their student loans. Goldo further added that even in his castle, he had never tasted meat as good as this. Lumia recalled Late mentioning it was frog meat and was surprised that the frogs from the forest could taste so delicious. Lumia speculated if this could be a Gallia frog. Goldo reminded her that Gallia frogs were notoriously difficult to prepare and not a species anyone could easily find in the forest. But Lumia said she had eaten them before, and the taste was identical to Late's dish. She also remembered that when they were at the castle, the king had once requested this dish. Out of hundreds of royal chefs, only one had managed to cook it properly. Late wondered aloud, what makes it so difficult to prepare? Goldo explained that the Gallia frog contained about 10 delicate poison sacs. If one broke, the entire frog would become toxic and inedible. The preparation method sounded familiar to Late, so he pulled out his hunted frog meat and asked if it was a Gallia frog. Lumia and Goldo were stunned to realize it indeed was a Gallia frog. Even more surprising, its body was perfectly intact. Late handed the dish to Goldo, then shoved it forcefully into his face, irritating Goldo with his boldness. Suddenly, a knock at the door startled Late, who hadn't expected visitors. Goldo called out, asking who was outside. A voice responded, recognizing Goldo's voice, introducing himself as Rassel, his teammate. Goldo invited Rassel in, and a boy who looked like he'd missed every gym session entered. Rassel, another royal guard, was relieved to see Princess Lumia safe. Goldo asked if Rassel had found any help. Rassel answered that he hadn't found anyone, and that this was the first house he had seen on the road. When he knocked, he was surprised to find everyone inside. Rassel then eyed Late suspiciously and asked what the stranger was doing with the princess. He also wondered about the peculiar nature of the house. Goldo explained that this was Late's house. Rassel was confused at the name and wondered if Late was friend or foe. Goldo clarified that Late was just a civilian, despite not looking the part. Princess Lumia added that Late had been a great help, killing the monster that attacked them and healing everyone. She further explained that even the king was resting in one of Late's rooms. The king had been poisoned by the monster, but Late had created a potent antidote, saving him. Rassel grew suspicious of the convenient timing, wondering why a stranger like Late had appeared so suddenly and offered help so willingly. He suspected Late had some ulterior motive and urged Goldo and the princess to leave the house immediately. Lumia reminded Rassel that the forest was full of dangerous creatures, and this house was the safest place. She was also upset with how Rassel spoke about the man who saved her and her father. Rassel was stunned by the princess's anger, as it was rare for her to raise her voice. Late then opened and closed the window to demonstrate they were not prisoners. He made it clear that if he had ill intentions, he wouldn't have let them roam freely in the unlocked room. Still, Rassel remained unconvinced. Late calmly stated that if he truly wanted to, he could kill them all, even if they attacked him. But he hadn't, because he had no such intention. He used Russell as an example, pointing out his careless demeanor and numerous vulnerabilities. Late stressed that he could kill Raisel in an instant if he chose to. Finally, Late taunted Russell, calling him weak and praising Goldo as the strongest of the group. However, he added that it would still take him about 10 seconds to kill Raisel with just the weapon in hand. Raisel, seething with anger, warned Late to watch his words, calling him arrogant and vile. Just as Raisel moved to attack, Princess Lumia stepped forward, ordering them both to quiet down, especially Raisel. She told Raisel she was displeased with the way he treated Late, the person who had saved both their lives. Lumia commanded Goldo that if Raisel defied her, he was to behead him immediately, for that would be an act of treason. Goldo took the command seriously, drawing his sword and placing it at Raisel's neck. Terrified, Raisel knelt and begged for forgiveness before Lumia. Late realized Lumia wasn't as simple as she appeared. Until now, she'd seemed like a typical young woman, but this side of her was terrifying. Even after the matter was settled, Late still sensed hostility from Raisel. To quell the tension, Late asked Princess Lumia for permission to challenge Raisel to a duel. He proposed that the match would have no rules. Raisel seethed with hatred, swearing that Late would pay for his arrogance. Late, however, realized that he stood no chance against a seasoned knight in a fair fight. So, he decided to play dirty. He explained that this wouldn't be a fight to the death, just a chance for the two of them to understand each other better, all for the noble cause of fighting. Truthfully, it meant nothing to Late. He just didn't want to make the mistake of killing the princess's bodyguard in this situation. Princess Lumia thought about Late's request. Although Raisel wasn't quite a true knight, he was still a powerful fighter. Goldo agreed with the princess, stressing that Russell was ranked among the top 3 in their elite royal knights and shouldn't be underestimated. Moments later, they were all in the backyard. Russell reminded Late that this match had no rules, confirming he just wanted to vent his anger in a fight. Late replied that the rules would remain the same and challenged Raisel to attack him with killing intent. Late wasn't concerned. He had potions to heal any wounds instantly. He held one up for Raisel to see. Raisel, confused, thought, "What is this?" Princess Lumia explained that it was a level 1 healing potion, highly effective. Raisel was stunned that someone like Late had such high-level medicine. He began to doubt if Late was truly just a civilian. Goldo commented that he also suspected Late wasn't an ordinary civilian, since the potions he carried could keep anyone alive for a lifetime. Raisel then asked Late if he was a healer, as potions were typically brewed by them, especially since Late had made an antidote. Goldo guessed Late might have been a personal physician for a kingdom. Raisel was skeptical, as he doubted any kingdom would abandon such a valuable physician. Late found the conversation strange, as in his world, people like that were called alchemists. Goldo and Raisel speculated that Late might be a druid who had fled his kingdom and hidden in the forest. Late found the idea absurd, but he preferred they think that rather than revealing he was from another world. Late cleared his throat to get their attention, reminding them he didn't like discussing his past. He emphasized that the match should begin immediately. Goldo volunteered to referee. A few minutes later, the match began. Both combatants assumed their stances, staring each other down. Late already held a flashbang in his left hand. Seconds later, he threw it at Raisel to blind him, creating an opening to attack. As Raisel struggled to see, Late snuck up behind him, preparing for an uppercut. But Raisel, despite being blind, managed to block the strike. Late was impressed and admitted that Raisel was a true knight. Immediately after, Raisel swung his sword at Late's throat. Late understood that a true swordsman could sense his opponent's presence. It was clear Raisel had mastered this, despite being just 20. This explained how Russell blocked Late's attack. Late realized defeating Raisel wasn't too difficult. He just needed to hide, get close, and deliver a precise strike to the neck. But Late wanted this duel to have meaning, so he aimed to win by showing the difference in their strength. Late noticed that Raisel relied heavily on his sword, and he decided that the only way to win was to destroy it. Confident in his victory, Late continued the duel. As their swords clashed, Raisel reluctantly acknowledged Late's strength, but Late smiled and claimed he could push further. Their swords locked in a fixed position. Now it would come down to sheer strength. Raisel warned Late that raw strength alone wouldn't win, but Late disagreed. In an instant, Late used his weapon to shatter Raisel's sword, leaving Raisel stunned. Late leaped into the air, ready to land the killing blow. Just then, Goldo shouted, "Game over," signaling that the match had gone too far. Late held back his attack and walked away, knowing he had bested Raisel. Late had used theft magic during the fight, a technique too taxing for prolonged combat. He only felt slight muscle pain, but if used against a stronger opponent, his body would have been in agony. He silently thanked Raisel for being weak. Late glanced back and saw Raisel crying, still unable to understand why his sword broke so easily. Late nonchalantly explained that he used a special technique to break the sword, though it was a lie. He actually used transmutation magic. Goldo later admitted he hadn't seen Late use any special sword skills and didn't believe Late was strong enough to destroy Raisel's sword. Late then asked about Raisel's sword, wondering if it was considered a good one. Goldo replied that it was a masterpiece, forged by a master blacksmith and given to Raisel after his promotion to Royal Knight. Late felt a pang of regret for destroying it. Late suggested they could revise it, but when Late picked up a piece of the broken sword, Raisel angrily snatched it away, cutting his finger by holding the blade bare-handed. Raisel, still furious, stormed off, but Princess Lumia ordered him to stop. She scolded him for acting like a coward, reminding him that not only had he insulted Late earlier, but his post-match behavior was an insult to the entire kingdom. Lumia bowed her head, apologizing to Late for Raisel's foolish actions. Goldo advised Lumia not to bow for too long and reminded her of her royal stature. Lumia asked Goldo what punishment would be fitting for Raisel's disgraceful conduct. Goldo replied that Raisel had disobeyed orders repeatedly, and his actions were a dishonor to the kingdom, so death was likely the only punishment. Lumia gasped in shock at the suggestion, as Late had anticipated. At just 15 years old, she didn't want to execute someone she had known for so long. Lumia suggested finding a punishment other than death, but Goldo reminded her that the kingdom's laws stated that a knight who dishonored the royal knighthood must be executed. Even Raisel accepted his fate, but Late suddenly spoke up, claiming there was no need for a death sentence. In his mind, Late thought the rule was too harsh. After all, if rude speech led to execution, the entire population of Earth would have been wiped out long ago. Still, he understood the knighthood's role in protecting the royal family, which justified such severity. However, Late could tell that Princess Lumia didn't truly want to see Raisel executed. He also realized that news of a royal knight's death could jeopardize the upcoming negotiations. Though Late had no duty to protect Raisel, he felt that intervening might be beneficial. He made it clear that while he was the one wronged, he didn't care about the consequences. Goldo, however, insisted that this issue was more serious because it involved the Royal Knight Order. He placed his hand on his chest, recounting the order's founding, to protect the royal family. He explained that dishonoring the knighthood was like insulting the royal family itself, which was why such strict rules existed. Late instantly understood it was about honor and prestige. He later told Goldo that the only witnesses to Raisel's cowardly actions were Lumia and himself. If all three kept silent, no one would ever know about it. Lumia and Late agreed to keep the matter secret, ensuring no one else would find out. After thinking for a moment, Goldo suggested that Raisel's fate be left in his and Late's hand. He explained that there was an exception in the Royal Knight Order's rules, allowing the punishment to be postponed if the prisoner was assigned a mission. Late understood Goldo's logic immediately. The execution would be delayed until the mission was completed, and if the mission never ended, neither would the punishment. However, both the victim and the accused had to consent to this arrangement. Once the exception was granted, Goldo would decide the details of the mission at his discretion. Raisel, deeply ashamed, bowed his head and thanked them. Goldo then reminded Raisel that if he ever repeated his mistake, he would lose his head and it would be served on a platter. He also informed Late that if he changed his mind at any point, he could order Raisel's immediate execution. Late was surprised to realize that he now had the power of life and death over Raisel, something he had never anticipated when he had planned just a simple trial match to show off. That afternoon, Late brought an extra bowl of water for Princess Lumia so she could wash her unconscious father's face. As Late touched the bed, he asked Lumia if it felt too hard. Lumia sat down, inspecting it, and remarked that all the furniture in this house seemed to be top quality. Late smiled, joking that he intended to use a piece of Raisel's sword to craft an even better bed. After the argument, Raisel's sword had been confiscated and returned to Late by Princess Lumia's order. Raisel had no choice but to hand it over, unless he wanted to risk his life. Lumia assumed Late would use the sword for a metal bed frame, but instead, he used it for the mattress. She immediately thought Late intended to use it for torture, and warned him that even with a good reason, torture was illegal, unless one was connected to the royal family, in which case, one might escape punishment. Late reassured her that he wasn't planning on torturing anyone and was simply making a normal bed. The idea of a bed with swords sticking out of it, while absurd, wasn't necessarily a bad one, just kidding. He then used magic to create the springs, forming a support frame for the mattress. As Late worked, Rysel watched, and his face twisted in disgust. Just then, Goldo shouted for him to get back to work. Not long after, Late finished installing the springs, added a cover, and magically fused everything together. Once done, he sat on the bed, praising its comfort, and invited Lumia to try it. She was astonished to see that Late had turned sword fragments into such a marvelous bed. When she sat down, the springs launched her into the air. As she landed, Lumia excitedly declared that she had never felt a bed so wonderfully soft. As she landed, Lumia excitedly declared that she had never felt a bed so wonderfully soft. Late told Lumia he'd make a few more beds around the house, since he had free time. After Late left, Lumia jumped onto the bed like a child, because in many ways, she still was. She tried out every possible sleeping position. Just then, Late returned and threw her a freshly made pillow. Lumia embraced the soft pillow and blushed as she watched Late leave the room. Later, Lumia saw Late working again and hesitated before asking him something. Finally, in a soft voice, she asked if she could take the bed back to the palace. Late was surprised that the only thing she was hesitant about was the bed. He told her it was no problem. He could make as many as she wanted as long as he had enough materials. Lumia was thrilled and thanked him, hugging her pillow tightly. Meanwhile, Rysel was being forced to work until he was utterly exhausted. The next morning, Lumia was shocked to see that her father had regained consciousness. The king was equally surprised, wondering how he was still alive. Late explained that it was all thanks to the level 2 potion he had personally prepared. The king laughed in disbelief, unable to fathom that an ordinary person could create such a powerful potion. King Lias then asked Late to demonstrate his skill by making a potion right before their eyes. Late agreed. Late agreed to make the potion, but only if the king first explained how he had been injured in the forest. The king glared at Late coldly, questioning if he truly dared to make demands of a king. However, his stern gaze quickly softened into a smile, and he agreed to Late's condition, but only after Late had successfully created a true level 2 potion. Lumia, worried, asked her father if he was certain about this decision. King Lias reassured his daughter, saying that he truly needed someone capable of making level 2 potions, and Late's skills would be invaluable to him. Together, they went into the kitchen, where Late began preparing the potion. He laid out the ingredients, with mejia grass as the main base. He placed the grass in a bowl and started grinding it with a pestle. The king complimented Late's technique, to which Late humbly responded that it was because he was a professional physician, though this was a lie. After grinding the grass to the right consistency, Late began to boil the mixture. The potion simmered through the night, and as darkness fell, it was finally completed. The vial showed a transparent red color, signaling it was a genuine level 2 potion. Late poured the finished potion into a bottle and prepared it for use. The king offered to test the potion, despite not being injured. He took a knife and sliced his palm. Goldo and Lumia screamed in alarm, watching in horror. The king opened the bottle and poured the potion on the wound. In an instant, the cut healed, even surprising Late, as the king had treated himself like an ordinary person. The king explained that he couldn't experiment on others, and that if the medicine worked, there would be no cause for concern. The king, princess, and Late sat down together, and King Lias decided to share their true mission. But Late had to swear not to reveal the details of their conversation. Late agreed. Finally, the king confessed that their mission was an assassination. The king revealed that the prince's bodyguard had been killed by a magician named Satarx, who had used teleportation magic. Despite his own fighting skills, the king had been too slow to react and had been injured in the attack. Late understood that their mission was an assassination, and teleportation magic played a key role in it. However, he knew teleportation magic alone couldn't kill someone. A trap set before teleportation could destroy even the strongest. After hearing the king's story, Goldo immediately knelt, apologizing for not risking his life to protect the king. King Lias asked Goldo to rise, assuring him that no one could have protected him in that situation. The king then assumed it had been Goldo who defeated the monster in the forest. Goldo quickly corrected him, saying it had actually been Late who destroyed the monster. King Lias was stunned. A physician of all people had defeated a monster. Late calmly explained that he had only used poison. At that moment, the king remembered the fatal wound he had received from the bear and wondered if everything was just a dream. Late then revealed a bottle of poison he had prepared from natural ingredients, leading King Lias to conclude that Late must be a potion expert. Goldo added that despite Late's claim of being a physician, he was also skilled in hand-to-hand combat, having easily defeated Raisel in mock combat. The king remembered that while Raisel was far from useful, his swordsmanship was top tier. Yet an unknown physician had beaten him effortlessly. Goldo also mentioned that Late had used a special technique to destroy Raisel's prized sword. After hearing about Late's actions, the king asked if Late could help him return safely to the palace. With the surrounding forest dangerous, the support of a skilled physician like Late would ensure their safety. However, Late didn't believe that returning to the palace would solve all their problems. He explained that whoever had summoned the monster would hardly welcome the king back. Satarx, the man behind the attack, was likely being executed for treason right now. Late also mentioned that Satarx had always been a shady character, and if the king disappeared, Satarx would be the first suspect. Late interrupted the king, questioning why someone as suspicious as Satarx was allowed to guard the prince. King Lias then realized his grave mistake in entrusting Prince Cassis's safety to Satarx. Late pressed further, asking how suspicious Satarx had truly acted. The king revealed that a string of strange deaths had occurred around Satarx, and rumors had circulated about him adding odd substances to his food. In fact, King Lias admitted that he would have preferred to hire adventurers to protect the prince rather than leave Satarx in charge. Late agreed that Satarx's behavior warranted execution. The king now understood that he should have executed Satarx long ago, but instead, the only punishment he'd received was being forced to wash dishes, after which he was immediately forgiven. Late then asked if anyone had ever questioned the king's wrong decisions, but no one spoke up, not even the chatty prime minister. Late began to understand how the magician had manipulated the situation. It was mind control magic, extremely complex to cast. However, Late explained that the success of such magic depended on how deeply it could manipulate its victim. If the king's memories were carefully examined, Late believed he could uncover the truth. Meanwhile, in the castle, Satarx realized that the mind control spell he had placed on King Lias had been broken. He began to wonder if someone had broken the spell on the king, but to him, that was irrelevant. Satarx swore that nothing, not even the king, would stop Luras Mars's orders. He also vowed to make a person named Rias suffer in agony and despair, if Rias was still alive. Meanwhile, at Late's house, the king asked whether Satarx was despised by everyone, and Late confirmed it. Suddenly, all three royals' eyes widened in unison, as if awakening from a deep trance. At that moment, the king realized a bitter truth. Everyone in the castle was still loyal to Satarx, despite his cruelty. Lias couldn't believe that his most trusted subjects would join forces with Satarx to overthrow him. Late coldly stated that their politics were a complete mess. Lias continued, explaining that few kings truly cared for their people as he did. Since taking the throne, the royal family's spending had been cut by more than half compared to the previous generation. But cutting necessary expenses entirely would leave him with nothing. Late understood the situation perfectly and concluded that Satarx had used mind manipulation to brainwash everyone in the castle. Yet, the king couldn't grasp the magic Late had mentioned. Late explained that it was a spell that controlled people's minds, bending them to the caster's will. Late, familiar with mind manipulation magic from the world of VLO, knew that only villainous NPCs could use it, not players. Lumia pointed out the obvious, that no one suspected Satarx because of his mind control. Still, the king was troubled. Lias realized Satarx could control him without banishing him, so why hadn't he done so? Late explained that royals and high-ranking adventurers were highly resistant to mind manipulation, which might be why Satarx had banished him instead. Lias understood Late's reasoning and knew he had to end Satarx's rule. If the mind manipulation was real, the kingdom would fall under Satarx's control. However, he still had no idea how to achieve that. Late then suggested a radical solution, piquing the king's curiosity. He said that if they killed the one using the mind control magic, all the affected people would be freed. Lias, however, was uneasy. He made it clear that Satarx was not an easy foe to defeat. Late replied that if the simple approach didn't work, they could always try something more complicated. Lias explained that the palace's defenses were too strong and sneaking inside was nearly impossible. Late calmly responded that if a defense that allowed a mind-controlling magician to infiltrate, breaking in would be easy. Lias, irritated by Late's confidence, insisted that only a highly trained assassin could bypass the palace defenses. And even if such an assassin existed, they would have no way to contact him. Late immediately reassured them, saying he could introduce them to an assassin. At first, Lias was skeptical that Late knew such a professional, but Late insisted that, with his ability to brew level 2 potions, having special connections wasn't unusual. The king reluctantly agreed. Lias argued that Satarx couldn't be killed by any assassin, since his palace had resisted many attempts before. Late immediately asked, "What does inviolable mean exactly?" He pressed further, asking if the defense included legendary barriers like indestructible barriers, magic blocking barriers, and spatial disruption barriers, some of the toughest in VLO. If those barriers existed together, they would be nearly impossible to destroy. However, the king quickly corrected himself, clarifying that it wasn't a legendary barrier. He added that the outer wall of the palace was only equipped with a defensive level that belonged to the immovable barrier class. Late quickly realized that the kingdom's defenses were weaker than they seemed. Immovable barriers were only mid-tier in VLO. He asked about other defense details, particularly the exterior windows. Lias replied that the windows had no magical defenses because the distance to the ground was too far for magic to affect them. Late chuckled, realizing that this assassination mission would be a walk in the park for him. It had been years since he had such an easy task. He then mentioned the possibility of carrying it out, but emphasized the reward would be crucial. Lias reminded Late that Satarx was a high-level magician, protected by an immovable barrier. Late calmly replied, "If I can't handle someone like Satarx, then I'm not worthy to call myself an assassin." Lias conceded that if such an assassin truly existed, he would need his help immediately, though doubts about success remained. Late assured him the mission would succeed. He even suggested that the reward could be given upon completion, and if he failed, he would take his own life to preserve his honor. After thinking it over, Lias agreed to Late's terms and asked to meet the assassin. With a snap of his fingers, Late conjured all of his assassination tools. He then introduced himself as both a doctor and now an assassin. Everyone was taken aback. They had assumed he was just a doctor. He made tea for everyone. Late explained that being a doctor was a valuable skill for an assassin, as poison was often the simplest and most effective method of killing. He took a sip of his tea as he spoke. Lias noted that Satarx might have prepared countermeasures against every kind of poison. Late countered with an example of a poison that was undetectable. It only became lethal once inside the victim's body, where it would create its own toxins. Lias asked how Late would apply such poison. Late explained that he would poison the royal family's crops by contaminating the soil where they grew. He would then create a magical flying device, hide in the clouds, and release the poison into the rainwater, making it undetectable. Lias doubted Late could easily create a magical flying device. Without another word, Late grabbed a piece of metal and used Bestol magic to forge a gun. Then his magical entity threw a teacup toward the king. Just as the teacup was about to reach the king, Late shot it, shattering it mid-air. Late explains that his goal is to demonstrate that with the right materials, he can create any magical tool. He then asks everyone to remain silent and leave, giving him space to carry out the assassination. Lias gazes at Late seriously, stating that if Late can eliminate the Satarx, he will reward him with whatever he desires. Late responds firmly, saying he wants a plot of land for a workshop, to keep his identity secret, and to establish a partnership with the kingdom. Lias understands Late's desire for land, but is puzzled by the need for secrecy and the mention of a partnership. Late explains that if he is exposed as an assassin, it would bring him great trouble. He also wishes to conceal his manufacturing profession from everyone except those he trusts. As for the partnership, Late clarifies that status doesn't matter. If one party wants something, they simply ask, and the other is free to accept or decline without obligation. Lias sees the value in this partnership, but feels he has no choice but to agree. They shake hands, sealing the deal. Late's target is the wizard Satarx, and in exchange, he will receive a plot of land, a hidden identity, and a partnership with the kingdom. Lias asks how long the assassination will take. Late responds that the poison method would take months, so a direct attack would be faster. King Leas expresses his desire for a quicker method, but one that ensures success without failure. He asks Late if it's possible. Late smiles cruelly, saying it all depends on the enemy's defenses. Late then asks Leas for details about the palace's defenses and the magical skills the Sitarks use. Leas admits he only knows the defense situation from when he was in office, and things may have changed since his expulsion. Late isn't concerned, saying he'll investigate the critical parts himself. Meanwhile, Princess Lumia walks down the hallway and hears voices from the living room. She enters to find her father, finishing his explanation of the kingdom's defense system. Though the kingdom is no longer his, Leas still dreams of reclaiming the throne. After the explanation, Leas asks Late if there's anything else he can do. Late responds that if Leas's information is accurate, this will be one of the easiest assassinations he's ever undertaken. Late emphasizes that with the right magical tools, he can handle everything. Leas is taken aback by Late's confidence in calling the mission easy. Late continues, saying he will carry out the assassination using magic tools. Leas, who knows little about assassination, must trust Late's methods. Late asks Goldo if the royal capital is 3 hours away. Goldo confirms that they are near Leneralia, so the distance is correct. Late insists that with enough materials, he could eliminate the Sitarks in just one day. He requests 500 magic stones, 30 kilograms of iron, and 10 kilograms of copper, asking Goldo if he can provide them. Goldo replies that there is a store in Leneralia where all the necessary materials can be bought. When Late asked if Goldo had any money, Goldo frantically searched his pockets and realized, "Damn, I'm broke." Late turned to the others and asked if anyone had any money, but they were all just as poor. Despite all his skills in assassination and production, Late was still penniless. He then asked Goldo if they could buy on credit by making an invoice. Goldo said he would check with the knight's order, but hesitated, not wanting to reveal that he was still alive. Late wondered if they could find the ingredients without going to the guild. If they could gather copper and iron, he could hunt monsters for magic stones. However, Leas reminded him that 30 kilograms of copper and 10 kilograms of iron was a hefty amount of money, and finding these materials without the guild's help would be challenging. Late understood that copper was rare, and metallurgical technology in this world was still primitive, which made the costs skyrocket. He knew he couldn't overlook these essential materials, so he decided to sell something to raise the money. Late spotted the level 2 potions on the table and asked if they could be sold. Leas said they could, but the selling price wouldn't be what they hoped for. Late then asked if he could sell a different potion if there was no time constraint, mentioning he could brew level 4 medicine. The mention of level 4 medicine left everyone stunned, as it was extremely rare. However, Goldo doubted Late could manage it. Leas also warned that brewing such a high-grade drug would draw unwanted attention, something they wanted to avoid. Leas explained that medicine was highly valued in the kingdom. Level 2 potions were only available to the royal family, with only one bottle made every 3 years. Level 1 potions were even rarer, and the mere thought of level 4 medicine was shocking. After considering their advice, Late suggested brewing a level 0 potion instead, as it would still be valuable, but wouldn't draw attention. Leas agreed it was a more reasonable choice. Late immediately set to work on brewing a level 0 potion, joking that it was on the same level as Leas's IQ, causing everyone to feel embarrassed. Late then poured pure water into a cauldron of level 2 potion, leaving everyone uneasy and confused. Late explained that diluting a high-grade potion would reduce it to a lower level one. Leas understood that, but he was concerned that Late had just diluted a rare potion, one that the kingdom only got once every few years, into a level 0 potion, which was commonly sold. Late told them to relax, assuring them that he could brew more level 2 potions whenever necessary. He reminded them that saving the kingdom was far more important. Leas admitted that he had never seen medicine prepared this way before, so he was truly surprised. After a while, Late finished mixing and stacking a series of level 0 potions, ready to be sold. Goldo asked if he could sell drugs at night. Late, taken aback, inquired why it had to be at night. Goldo explained that selling by day would make him an easy target for the chivalric order. He also didn't know who his enemies might be, so he preferred to avoid any unnecessary risks. Late, grasping the situation, quickly thought of a way to help Goldo move undetected by the chivalric order. He used magic to create a disguise tool. Goldo took the tool and instantly transformed into a gaunt, middle-aged man who seemed devoid of life. Leas remarked that he could no longer recognize him. Late then showed Goldo his reflection, and Goldo was horrified by his grotesque new face. He was stunned, realizing that Late had crafted such an ingenious tool. Late offered to assist Goldo in obtaining 500 magic stones, but Goldo assured him that Raisel had already taken care of it. Just when Late thought Raisel couldn't become more hideous, Raisel surprised him by using the disguise tool to further mask his identity. Late acknowledged that the tool worked well, but reminded Goldo that their voices remained unchanged, so they had to be cautious in their interactions. Goldo then mentioned he wanted to return to his true face during negotiations, and Late explained that they simply needed to whisper "terminate" to end the disguise and "activate" to reactivate it. Now, Goldo and Raisel understood the tool's use and entered the city to sell drugs. Sometime later, Late realized his current home was ill-suited for crafting assassination tools. He decided to build a more fitting workshop. Late crouched down to gather the ingredients he had prepared in advance. Lias appeared behind Late, saying he had more to discuss. He asked if the magical disguise tool could be used to transform into a specific person. Late, noticing Lias's intent, responded that it would take time to perfect, but it was certainly possible. He asked Lias for the reason, but Lias merely replied that he didn't need it immediately, just sometime in the future. Lias also requested a set after the assassination mission succeeded. Late agreed, but insisted on a hefty payment. At that moment, Lumia peeked out the window, bubbling with excitement as Mackie had repaired her old clothes, making them look brand new. She noticed Late and her father in a serious conversation and asked if she was interrupting. Her father reassured her that their discussion was over. He then entered the house, leaving Late to prepare for the construction of his new workshop. Late began using combination and transformation magic, reminding himself that his ultimate goal was not to defeat the magician Sitarx, but to destroy the evil god Masur Azul. The current assassination mission and his alliance with the royal palace were merely stepping stones. Late considered how the Mysis kingdom could play a crucial role in the battle against the mysterious evil god, as a god's power is shaped by the faith of its followers. Therefore, controlling a nation could provide a significant advantage. In essence, Late's goal was to maintain good relations with the kingdom. A few hours later, Raisel and Goldo returned, carrying a large box from their successful trip. The king asked if they had accomplished their mission. Goldo answered that they had secured 30 kilograms of iron, 10 kilograms of copper, and 500 magic stones. Late was amazed that only 2 people had managed to carry such a heavy load over such a long distance. He picked up the iron bar and immediately tested its quality. While not the best, it was still good enough to be used in crafting. Late examined a piece of iron, and when Goldo saw this, his face twisted into an even uglier expression than usual. Goldo reached out and touched Late's thin arm, commenting that despite skipping arm day, Late was still surprisingly strong. Meanwhile, Late found a medicinal herb, which Raisel had picked for him to aid in creating potions and magical tools. Late smiled at Raisel in appreciation, but Raisel quickly looked away as if to say, "Wait, I'm not gay." With the materials now at hand for crafting magic tools, Late told Goldo he would block the doors and windows. If Goldo needed anything, he would have to call from outside. Goldo whispered if the formula for crafting magic tools was a secret. Late replied that indeed it was a secret, but the real reason for locking the room was the dangers involved in the manufacturing process. After all, a tool designed to kill was never safe. Late also offered to keep an eye on Raisel, ensuring the fool wouldn't try to break down the door and cause trouble. He thanked Goldo and assured him he'd handle the rest alone. He reminded Goldo that since they were heading to the palace the next morning, he had prepared an outdoor bath so Goldo could relax. Late didn't want him ruining the mission, so he insisted Goldo rest and recharge. Goldo was surprised by Late's mention of the mission the next morning, thinking Late would use up all the ingredients before dawn. Late explained that he intended to stay up all night. His situation left no room for mistakes. Late then used transformation magic to complete his secret mobile store. Moments later, the magical flying tool Late had created soared into the common area of the house, startling everyone. Raisel and Goldo immediately went on alert, but Late appeared suddenly. With a single word, "terminate," the tool vanished before it could cause any harm. He apologized for letting it escape during the testing phase, but now it was fully completed. Then he gestured to a large load and asked if they could carry it, explaining that it was the product he had made that day. Late packed it carefully to ensure that, no matter how much it was jostled, nothing inside would be damaged. King Leas entered, sharply dressed, and the two exchanged looks that spoke volumes. Everyone understood that the assassination mission was about to begin. For Late, this would be his first assassination since arriving in this world. He asked if everyone still remembered the plan. Goldo began explaining the plan. They would disguise themselves and head to town, waiting at Wyron's hideout. When they received a signal from the magic tool, they would execute the assassination and emerge once the mission was successful. Leas told Late that once he defeated the Satarks, he would leave the rest to him. Late reminded everyone to use the disguise tools to conceal their true identities. After completing his disguise, Goldo realized his new look was even uglier than before. Late shrugged, explaining that the point was to leave no lasting impression. Late noticed the tension within the group, especially from Princess Lumia. He understood that if they failed, the kingdom of Macy would be nothing but a memory in the history books. Goldo, now out of disguise, asked if the tool could change their gender. This raised Late's hopes that maybe his suspicions weren't true. Goldo explained that upon arriving in Lenalia City, he saw wanted posters showing the targets as 3 men and 1 woman. He feared Satarks may have ordered a search for their group and suggested changing the gender of some members to reduce suspicion. Late understood the logic, but was concerned that if the entire group were male, it might attract even more attention. Raisel proposed that they be a mix of 2 men and 2 women, which Goldo agreed was a reasonable idea. Late assigned roles: Goldo as the mother, Raisel as the father, and ironically, Princess Lumia and King Leas would play the children. King Leas argued that, since they were posing as merchants, he would be the best choice to play the father. Late countered that, given the information they had gathered, it was likely that people in the kingdom were keeping an eye on Leas. Even if he altered his voice, his mannerisms would still be recognizable. Therefore, it would be better for him to take a role that didn't fit. Late then asked Goldo and Raisel if they agreed to the conditions, and both confirmed they were willing. Late explained how to change gender by pressing the button on top of the disguise tool. When Goldo transformed into a beautiful, seductive woman, everyone was stunned, though she was a bit too tall. Raisel expressed concern that Goldo's height might draw attention. When Goldo spoke in a frog-like voice, both the king and Raisel quickly silenced her, warning her not to speak in such a creepy tone while in such a seductive form. Princess Lumia couldn't hold back and burst into laughter, drawing the attention of the group. Lumia quickly apologized for laughing too much. The group finished their transformations, ready for the mission. The decisive moment for the kingdom of Mesis had arrived. Late, using his shape-shifting magic, created small, magical mice, which would play a crucial role in the mission's success. All mission data had been uploaded into Late's system, and everything was functioning perfectly. He ordered the mouse army to begin moving. Meanwhile, the rest of the group arrived in the kingdom, their ridiculous disguises making them an odd sight. Just as Late predicted, the civilians in the kingdom appeared to converse normally, but their eyes were dull and lifeless, as though under someone's control. At that moment, Princess Lumia accidentally bumped into a man who was both shockingly obese and unattractively ugly. She shuddered in fear, not just because of his appearance, but because his face was so grotesque. Raisel immediately stepped forward, ready to handle the man, but Goldo intervened, giving the man some money. The man took the money and, satisfied, stepped back. Once the situation settled, the group continued their journey, undeterred by the incident. Goldo then asked Raisel if he still hated Late. Raisel replied that he no longer harbored any ill will, having realized that personal conflicts could ruin the entire plan. Raisel seemed to have matured since his first encounter with Late. He added that this mission was far too important to let personal issues get in the way. Raisel then asked King Leas if he was comfortable staying in a normal house like this. Leas responded that staying in a more luxurious place would attract too much attention and raise suspicion. Therefore, the best place to take refuge was Wyron's hideout. Meanwhile, Late was using his magical flying tool to scan the kingdom, searching for Satarks. Given Satarks' status as a high-ranking magician, his magical energy would stand out. Moments later, Late detected a powerful burst of magical energy, signaling that Satarks was nearby. He also sensed the activation of a magical barrier, so he moved closer. Late realized the barrier could easily be breached from within, but using magic from outside to attack would be ineffective due to its extreme durability. However, the palace's security overlooked the underground sewer system, which was only 30 centimeters wide, a path Late's magical mice could use to infiltrate the castle. At that moment, he received a message from Goldo through the magical communicator. Goldo reported that they had reached Wyron's hideout and asked how Late was progressing. Late replied that, although he was surprised to find windows with magical barriers, it wasn't a significant problem for him. Goldo mentioned that, as Late had predicted, the civilians in the kingdom seemed to be brainwashed, wandering around like soulless zombies. The large-scale manipulation reminded Late of Satarx's terrifying power. He wondered why Satarx had waited so long to use it. Late suggested that perhaps Satarx had been waiting for a specific moment. Just then, a thought struck the king. Why had Satarx waited so long before launching his attack? However, he decided not to dwell on it, hoping it was nothing more than overthinking. He then reminded Late of his request from the forest to protect Prince Cassus if he was found. Late confirmed this and understood the king's trust in him. We see a group of servants entering the king's bedroom, where Satarx sat on the throne. One of the servants bowed and addressed him as temporary king. Late recognized an opportunity to make a move, so he directed his magic tool toward the bedroom door. However, he quickly detected a warning magic surrounding the door, which would alert anyone if a stranger entered. Late decided to try sniping, but quickly realized his position was out of range. He was surprised to find that the room was better protected against assassination than he had anticipated. Late focused on listening to the conversation within the room. He overheard a servant mention that they had sent missionaries to over 10 towns to promote conversion to a new religion. The servant also reported that about 246 people had been approached and discussed converting. However, Satarx believed that number was too low according to his standards. Late listened closely and realized that Satarx was planning to change the people's religion, but the reasoning behind it remained unclear. The servant further reported that despite the missionaries' best efforts, there was strong resistance to changing beliefs after so many years of worshipping the old gods. Satarx dismissed this, calling ineffective mind control for conversion a bad result. He ordered his servants to redouble their efforts to prevent the country's collapse and emphasized the need to rely on the god Lurus Mars. Late was surprised to learn that besides the goddess Meses and the evil god Masur Azul, there were other gods in this world. Satarx reminded the servant how to deal with those who resisted conversion by persuading them with force, using fists and whips. To accomplish this, they had set up a punitive congregation, scheduled to begin operations the following day. Satarx approved and blessed the new religion. Late understood that the religion was being forced upon the people, with coercion and torture replacing genuine conversion. Late asked Goldo if he knew anything about Lurus Mars. Goldo replied that it was a new religion that had appeared in the country about 30 years ago. It promised many practical benefits, which is why it had gained many followers. Late asked what those benefits were, and Goldo explained that followers of Lurus Mars would receive free bread if they attended church. The faith was based on charity towards others. However, Goldo also expressed curiosity about the source of the money used to provide food. Despite rumors of the religion's darker side, it remained popular. Late concluded that this religion attracted followers through bribery, though the source of the funds remained suspicious. Goldo added that some people still believed in the goddess Mysis, mostly those around his age, about 30 years old. Meanwhile, most younger people followed Lurus Mars. Goldo asked why Late was suddenly inquiring about religion, and Late simply said he was curious. At that moment, Late sensed a powerful magical reaction. He immediately informed everyone that their cover had been blown. Just then, an attack was launched straight at Princess Lumia. Goldo rushed in and blocked the attack, protecting her. King Lias and Raisel shouted in concern. The attackers turned out to be two former members of the chivalric order who recognized Lias and were shocked to see he was still alive. Rumors had spread that he had died from illness. One of them commented on the impressive power Satarx had granted them. The king was surprised by their ability to locate him, despite their perfect concealment. Raisel stepped forward, revealing that the attackers were Bata and Sting, former knights, likely under manipulation. Bata noticed their curiosity about how their location had been revealed and explained it was due to Cruin's marking magic. Raisel told them to be quiet, as he didn't believe that Cruin would ever side with the enemy. He explained that even when manipulated, it was easy to spot the cloudy look in the eyes of those under control. One of the former knights called Raisel stupid, and the other continued, noting that their group had sold 100 vials of level 0 medicine simultaneously. He also commented on their rapid return from the monster-filled forest. He asked who had helped them, but Leah simply answered it was a bedmaker in the forest. Lias then confronted the two former knights, asking why they had sided with Satarks to take over the country, suggesting it might be for money or power. Both shouted power, and explained that before, they had been weaklings. A strong king would give them the power to be free, to rule everything, and to take it all. They declared that a weak king, easily overthrown, was not worthy of protection. Their words echoed Lias's deepest fears, that the kingdom of Mises would be reborn under the guidance of a new god. Just then, a mysterious sword appeared from the leg of one of the former knights. Raisel immediately rushed to attack him. Lias kicked a chair toward the other former knight, trapping him against the wall. Raisel continued attacking, slashing at the knight, calling him a cowardly traitor. At this moment, Goldo and Lumia arrived, witnessing the two former knights in critical condition, near death. Lumia ran to hug her father, creating a rare, touching moment in the story. However, the unexpected happened. The two former knights, still clinging to life, made one final stand. They suspected the sword that pierced the leg was the result of exchange magic. Immediately after, they vowed to make everyone associated with the king suffer. Raisel and Goldo told Lias to step back so they could show these criminals the power of the Mises kingdom's knights. Raisel, unfazed by criminals who relied on magic like Bata, used the kingdom's royal sword art and unleashed a powerful move, Lightning Storm. Bata felt Raisel was looking down on him, so he reminded him that thanks to the magical power granted by Satarks, he was no longer the weakling he once was. Bata showed off his newfound strength, surprising everyone as he had once been weak. He attacked Raisel, but Raisel stood firm, leaving Bata unimpressed. However, this was just the beginning. Sting rushed to attack Raisel, catching him off guard and preventing him from reacting in time. A flashback appeared, where Goldo offered Late some food, knowing he had skipped dinner the previous night. Lias reminded Late of a request to build something and asked how it was progressing. Late responded that it was finished, and that he had made one for everyone. Late crafted a shoulder shield for Goldo, embedded with defensive magic. This shield was a perfect match for Goldo's fighting style, enabling him to block enemy attacks. Its defensive power was so strong, it could be compared to an impenetrable barrier. Goldo used the shield to block Sting's attack, and reminded Raisel that his opponent was much stronger, warning him not to let his guard down any longer. Sting was surprised that Goldo was unharmed, despite taking such a powerful blow, and was impressed with the shield's strength. Bata immediately told Sting to be quiet, declaring that Goldo's shield would be ineffective against his magic. No matter how strong their defensive equipment was, they would still need to dodge and counterattack in order to survive. Bata launched a butterfly fragment attack at Lias, but Lias's expression indicated he had a way to deal with it. It was revealed that before the mission, Late had given Lias an improved directional barrier for defense. Lias reassured the guards that they no longer needed to worry about him, as he could now protect himself. Sting and Bata were stunned to see that Lias possessed not just a regular barrier, but a customized directional one. Lias then launched an attack on the traitor knights, who quickly dodged. However, they were shocked by the attack, as it was the first time they had seen a directional barrier used offensively, and it broke their formation, providing an opening for Raisel to counterattack. Sting tried to use magic to stop Raisel's uppercut, but he was shocked when Raisel passed through his defenses and continued delivering fatal blows, finishing the attack. The weapon Raisel wielded was a magical sword, called the Burning Ceremony, given to him by Late before the mission. This sword was forged from a burning tree and was said to be immensely powerful. However, it could only be used once, so Raisel had been advised to save it for when it was truly needed. Before the mission began, Raisel had only considered it a normal wooden sword, dismissing the name Burning Ceremony as a joke. Late had told Raisel that the sword would awaken hidden power within the wielder when ignited, but Raisel didn't believe him, thinking burning the sword wouldn't change anything. Despite Raisel's attack, it wasn't strong enough to kill Sting, and the latter recovered shortly afterward. Sting immediately swore Raisel would regret not finishing him off. At that moment, Bata told Sting to be quiet. Just then, an attack was launched straight at Princess Lumia. Bata then realized that Satarks was in grave danger. In a flash, a massive explosion rang out, and the kingdom's protective barrier crumbled. Lias, confused, wondered what caused such a huge explosion while Late had only been assigned to silently assassinate Satarks. The ex-knights, assuming they had the upper hand, didn't feel the need to check on Satarks, thinking their opponents were waiting for them to make the move. Bata emphasized that weaklings like them didn't need to worry about someone as powerful as Satarx. Meanwhile, Satarx sat calmly on his throne, sipping tea. He was aware of the kingdom's attacks, but was unaware of who was behind them. He was confident that no one could kill him easily. Late quickly analyzed the barrier, realizing that each time it was attacked, it only held for a brief 2 seconds. He prepared to strike again. Just as Late's attack neared, Satarx began reciting a special protective spell, reinforcing the barrier and halting Late's strike, sending an earth-shaking echo throughout the kingdom. Late recognized that Satarx had used the power of a long incantation to fortify the barrier. The deafening noise made Lias wonder if everything was going according to plan. The ex-knights grinned, confident in their victory, declaring that their master's power exceeded their expectations. It was then that they noticed a strange shift in the air. Something had changed. Sting activated his nail machine gun technique, launching a barrage of vicious attacks. Goldo quickly noticed that their strength had greatly increased in just a few minutes. Sting quickly reminded Goldo that he was no longer the weakling he once tossed around like a rag doll. Goldo acknowledged this, but pointed out that Sting remained as reckless as ever. With a swift strike to the ground, Goldo knocked Sting off balance, making him realize the gravity of his situation. Raisel immediately seized the opportunity to strike as Sting struggled to regain his footing. But before Raisel could land a blow, Bata appeared, grinning maliciously. He taunted Raisel, asking him not to forget about him and to spend some time engaging with him. Raisel charged at Bata, but Bata countered with a blast of magic. Bata mocked Raisel, reminding him of his past words about defeating him with the oh-so-royal swordsmanship. Just then, Bata felt a slight sting on his face, unsure whether it was Raisel's doing. What unsettled Bata more was that Raisel had withstood the entire battle wielding a broken sword. Suddenly, Raisel began to glow with a super saiyan-like energy, and Bata realized something had changed with Raisel's sword. Initially thinking it was just a magic sword, Bata soon discovered that Raisel had coated it with a special ore. Raisel declared that nothing had changed for him. He feared no knight who relied solely on magic. This time, he vowed to fight with everything he had, no mercy. The attacks from Raisel had made it clear to Bata that Raisel had mastered his fighting style and was no longer the same opponent he once was. Bata sneered arrogantly, confident that his attack would crush Raisel. But in an instant, the king raised a directional shield, effortlessly blocking the strike. He reminded Raisel that his reckless advance had put them in a vulnerable position. He commanded everyone to fall back and regroup. The enemy's power exceeded their expectations, but there was still hope if they used Late's items. He told them to hold on and wait. Raisel coldly stepped forward, and in the calmest tone, told Lias to be silent. He believed that caution was not the key to victory. With determination, Raisel charged forward, vowing not to dishonor the kingdom of Mises. Bata mocked him, suggesting that Raisel should just listen to Lias. He taunted them both, telling them to look behind. The two turned and saw a magical disaster descending toward Goldo, who was blissfully unaware of the impending danger. Lias shouted Goldo's name, but the distance between them was too great for him to hear. Without hesitation, Raisel and the king rushed toward Goldo. Raisel surged ahead, desperate to save him. As he ran, Raisel's mind filled with the weight of his past failures, the loss in the practice match with Late, and missing the tracking spell placed on him. He blamed himself for so many missed chances, wondering if his months of training had been in vain. This is starting to feel pathetic. But in that moment, Raisel felt that this was his chance to become a hero, to save someone. He reached Goldo just in time, leaping forward to shield him. The magic struck him, piercing his chest and leaving a gaping wound. The scene shifted to the night before their departure, back at Late's house, where they were checking their gear for the mission. Late noticed something strange beneath Raisel's arm, a magical tracker, explaining why their location had always been exposed. Raisel immediately apologized, frantic to remove it, but it was too late. Just then, Lias had an idea: leave the tracker in place. He suspected that the Satarx would send Bata and Sting to stop their mission. He suggested Raisel use the tracker to sneak into the royal capital, with the hope of luring Bata and Sting away once Late was ready. Both Goldo and Raisel warned that such a mission was far too dangerous for the king to take part in. Lias, standing awkwardly, responded that a true king would never sacrifice others for their own safety. He then ordered Lumia to stay with Goldo, but she immediately protested. The king urged Lumia to stop her reckless actions, warning her of the perilous nature of the mission. Yet, Lumia retorted, saying that it was precisely because of the danger that she had to join, unwilling to be seen as a weak and worthless princess should they succeed in reclaiming the kingdom. The king and princess exchanged icy glares. After a tense silence, the king reluctantly agreed, but ordered Goldo to ensure that if the situation worsened, Lumia was to be taken away at once. Meanwhile, Raisel lay on the ground, his body drained. Lias and Goldo were still locked in combat. Lumia and her pet rushed to Raisel, quickly pouring a level 2 potion on him, hoping to revive him. However, his frail body remained unresponsive. In a faint voice, Raisel urged the princess to flee while she still could. He hoped that Late would be able to manage the rest on his own. Teetering between life and death, Raisel tormented himself, feeling he had once again disgraced the name of the Mysis kingdom. But Lumia no longer cared about that. She simply told him to rest. At that moment, Bada slowly stepped forward, advising Raisel to heed the princess's words, for any further resistance was futile. Hearing Bada's voice, Lumia spun around in fear. Realizing her distress, Lias and Goldo rushed to her side. Bada then turned to Raisel, lamenting the contrast between their fates, despite having once been classmates. He extended his hand, offering Raisel the power of Satark, promising strength far beyond what he currently possessed. Bada urged Raisel to abandon the king and princess, seeing them only as burdens keeping him from reaching his full potential. Meanwhile, Late continued his struggle to break through Satark's barrier, but was unsuccessful, for Satark was casting an incredibly long spell, a spell so intricate that even seasoned magicians would falter with just 5 letters. Late realized that Satark was on an entirely different level. Late then decided to implement his backup plan, the third assassination weapon, a specially crafted magical dreadnought missile. The missile was too heavy to fly on its own, due to its vast magical explosive content, but even Satark's powerful barrier couldn't withstand it. The missile soared toward Satark, but he sensed its power and knew he had to strengthen his defenses. He secreted a magical fluid and began chanting a spell with 12 words. The missile collided with the barrier, but to Late's astonishment, Satark's shield held firm. He couldn't believe it. Such a long spell was beyond even the strongest magicians in VLO. Yet Late couldn't suppress a sinister smile, realizing it was time to deploy his final trump card. It seemed that Raisel would yield to Bada's tempting offer, but instead, he refused, declaring that he was a royal knight and would pledge his strength and future to the royal family. Bada, disappointed, mocked Raisel, calling him no different than a mere puppet, destined to serve as the foundation for their glory. Lumia seethed with anger at Bada's words, calling those he manipulated soulless puppets. Raisel tried to rise to protect the princess, sensing danger, but collapsed once more, his face grim with seriousness. Lumia confronted Bada, demanding to know what he gained from tormenting the innocent. In response, Bada slapped her hard across the face. His original plan was to kill her on the spot, yet when their eyes locked, something in him faltered. He hesitated, Bada's gaze fixed on Lumia. Her small frame seemed to loom large, as if her very presence towered over him. With a sudden surge of power, Sting hurled Goldo and Lias against the wall, the force of it echoing in the air. Lumia screamed, panic rising in her as she saw her father in danger. Goldo, still dazed, urged the king and princess to retreat. He could feel the overwhelming magical energy radiating from Sting. Sting advanced, his bloodlust now sharper, colder. He turned to Bada, asking why he had yet to finish them off. Bada, flustered, apologized, admitting he had lost control. In that moment, a dark shadow seemed to spill from Sting's body, reminding him of his earlier outburst. The shadow's voice twisted with suspicion, accusing Bada of wavering in his loyalty to Luris Maris. Bada froze, recognizing the voice of Satark's, and tried to explain himself, but was swiftly silenced. Satark's voice grew colder as he condemned both Sting and Bada as failures, bitterly labeling them as the discarded remnants of the old Mysis kingdom. Without a word of warning, Satark's summoned dark magic to descend upon them, intending to burn their souls as fuel for his spells. He scoffed, declaring their sacrifice would at least serve some purpose. The spell's power manifested as a twisted hybrid magic known as Spiral Requiem, formed from their sacrifice. Yet Satark's was still unsatisfied, mocking the weak result of such a futile sacrifice. The massive spiral requiem spiraled towards them, but Goldo, with great effort, intercepted it in time. He turned to King Lias, urging him to flee. He could no longer hold his ground. Lias refused, shaking his head. He would not retreat, not in the face of such danger. Goldo scowled, but reluctantly agreed. Lias then ordered Lumia to take Rassel and leave the battlefield. Yet, like father, like son, Lumia stubbornly refused. Goldo sighed, accepting the inevitable. It felt like the end. He thanked Lias, as one on their deathbed would, but Lias, ever the strategist, urged him not to give up just yet. Lias expressed his disgust for Satark's treatment of his subordinates. He warned that if this continued, not only would their lives be consumed by magic, but they would fall prey to monsters long before that happened. Yet Lias still clung to the hope of a counterattack, a glimmer that could shift the tide of battle. Just then, Rassel rose, his body trembling with effort. His grip tightened around the burning ceremony sword, his eyes cold with resolve. Lias, worried for his son's weakened state, told him not to act recklessly. But Rassel, unwavering, replied that he was responsible for this chaos and would not die until his enemies were vanquished. He believed in Late's words, that the burning ceremony sword was more than just a simple staff. It was a weapon of immense power. He shouted, "Burning ceremony!" The moment the words left his lips, a fiery explosion erupted, igniting the air around them. Everyone watching gasped in awe. The small staff Rassel had held before was now a massive, flaming sword, its power radiating outward. Instantly, the sword's special abilities surged into Rassel's mind, and he understood its full potential. This transformation filled him with newfound confidence. For the first time, he truly believed he could win this battle. Lias declared he would protect Lumia, urging Goldo and Rassel to focus on the true target. Rassel's eyes were empty, yet resolute. He leapt into the air, channeling Macy's Kingdom Imperial sword art, glittering binary star. Satark's, using Sting as a vessel, was not directly affected by Rassel's attack. Instead, it was aimed at Sting alone. Suddenly, a massive hole tore open in the sky, pouring brilliant light down upon the battlefield. Goldo wondered if, at last, this chaotic battle was nearing its end. Lias remarked that Rassel's magical tool was so powerful it had ripped through the clouds above. Lumia, anxiety creeping in, worried about Late's situation on the other side. Just then, Rassel shouted at her to look behind. Before she could react, a brainwashed civilian stabbed her in the chest between her ribs. The oddest thing was that Lumia felt no pain at all. She stood motionless, staring at the knife lodged in her chest, leaving everyone around her in stunned silence. Out of nowhere, a shot erupted from her chest, striking a nearby civilian who had been senselessly watching. It turned out the shot came from a magical gun, controlled by an entity conjured by Late. Lumia stood there in disbelief as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She had killed someone, and the shot had come from the very spot where the knife was lodged. Goldo and Lias rushed to her, asking if she was injured. She assured them she was fine, attributing her survival to the magical entity inside her. The magic tool embedded in her chest had stopped the knife from piercing her flesh. Meanwhile, Rassel's sword ran out of energy. In that moment, he realized how fortunate he was to have it. Without the sword, they all would have been victims of the monsters. He sincerely thanked Late for everything he had done. Goldo suggested they hurry, aware that crowds were drawing near. Lias nodded in agreement, and the group quickly moved on. Just seconds after they left, a colossal beam of light shot up from the palace. Meanwhile, Late and Satark's were locked in a tense confrontation, their words sharp and charged with animosity. Satark's, furious that Late was such a difficult opponent to defeat, demanded that Late reveal his true identity. Late responded coldly, saying that it was still too soon for a proper introduction. Satark's, relentless, declared that he must fulfill Masur Azul's great will, and there was no time to waste on inferior beings like Late. This remark caught Late's attention, especially when Satark's used the god's real name, Masur Azul, rather than Lura's Mars. It suggested Satark's knew the true identity of the god he followed. Then, a massive explosion shook the air, and Satark's assumed it was the result of Sting and Bada's fusion magic. Yet, the force was not as great as he had anticipated, though still powerful enough to make an impact. Satark's believed they had already defeated Lias, so eliminating the person who assisted King Lias would mark the end of it all. But before he could finish his thought, a giant rift appeared in the sky, and the magic of Bada and Sting disappeared. In a panic, Satarx muttered to himself, "What in the world is going on?" At that moment, Late unleashed a devastating new attack. Satarx believed it was similar to his previous defenses and assumed he could easily block it, but he was wrong. His fingers began to rot from the soul spell. Late's ultimate weapon, Soul Destroyer, struck with brutal force. This spell, a forbidden assassination magic, could defeat any magician. Satarx's body began to decay, his desperate chance failing to halt the breakdown. Powered by the resonance of magical stones, the spell created a frequency that shattered the soul. No barrier could protect against it. The soul, the very core of life, could never be fortified. No magic could shield it from destruction. Yet, even in the face of these cruel realities, Satarx refused to surrender. He continued his incantations. Even as Soul Destroyer reached its peak, Satarx persisted. Satarx was still alive, but kneeling, his body torn apart. The air shimmered with strange magic around him. Late, observing the scene, realized Satarx wasn't just casting a spell, but performing a ritual. Offering his eyes and arms to Masur Azul, Satarx sought protection for his soul. This ritual was unlike anything Late had ever encountered, a form of magic beyond the known arts of Vlo. As a powerful wind howled, Satarx reappeared, his eyes and limbs gone, a twisted figure of magic. Meanwhile, King Lias and his group were pursued by brainwashed citizens, cornered with no escape in sight. Just when hope seemed lost, the spell controlling the citizens vanished, and Lumia wondered if Late had caused this, though no one could say for sure. Magical forces detached from the brainwashed citizens and soared into the sky, gathering into a massive, ominous shape. It seemed Satarx had infused his magic into them, using the citizens as pawns. From a distance, Late observed Satarx's power. It had surpassed the limits of any ordinary magician, reaching divine levels. The massive orb of magic hung in the sky, a concentrated force too powerful to evade or defend against. Despite this, Late remained confident in his ability to destroy it. He calculated the energy speed, the distance, his remaining weapons, and his magical reserves. Late determined that in exactly 1 minute, the outcome would be sealed. He turned to Satarx and told him to keep going, then activated his hidden weapon. Sensing Late's potential threat to Masur Azul, Satarx summoned 3 giant magical minions, using the triple monkey golem technique to confront Late. Thunder and lightning clashed as they charged at each other, knowing this final blow would decide the battle. Moments later, a thunderous explosion shook the air. With mere seconds remaining, Late stood victorious, holding a needle in his hand, his mission complete. He immediately contacted his team, informing them that Satarx had been successfully assassinated. They celebrated the victory, and King Lias offered his sincere thanks, promising Late a reward for the mission's success. Lias assured Late that he would handle the rest, and asked him to worry no more. Late had expected this task to be simple, but facing Satarx, a foe of such strength, after only 6 days in this world, left him surprised. The weapon Late used to defeat Satarx was an ultra-thin needle, less than 0.2 millimeters in diameter, coated with a deadly, irreversible poison. Satarx, distracted by Late's flashy attacks, never realized he had been secretly poisoned, according to the original plan. Late coldly remarked that even though Satarx had grown 1,000 times stronger, he was ultimately still useless. After agreeing to Goddess Mize's request to destroy Masur Azul and Satarx, Late had to confront countless challenges to reach this point. Satarx was an incredibly powerful opponent, able to cast spells that were nearly impossible to counter. Late knew that had Satarx somehow avoided the poison, the battle would have ended differently. But Late also acknowledged that, without Goddess Mize's request, he would never have encountered such an intriguing assassination mission. Late felt a strange gratitude for the goddess, who had thrust him into such a fascinating world. Days later, Late met with Raisel in a moment of confusion. This meeting was Raisel's way of expressing thanks for Late's actions. He announced that the royal family would provide generous compensation and officially declared the mission complete. Raisel bowed his head, apologizing to Late for his previous disrespectful behavior during their time working together. He also took the opportunity to express his gratitude once more for all that Late had done. Late, taken aback, was surprised by this sudden humility. He had always known Raisel to be bitter and petty, yet now there seemed to be a noticeable shift in him. Before Raisel departed, Late handed him a new sword. As Russell unsheathed it, he realized with shock that it was his old sword. Bewildered, he wondered how this was possible, considering he had witnessed the sword's destruction firsthand. Late then revealed that Maki, Lumia's magical pet, had recovered a piece of the broken sword. With this fragment, Late had painstakingly analyzed and recreated the sword. He explained that Russell's true thanks should go to Maki. Russell blushed slightly at the revelation and offered his gratitude to Late, hoping the situation wouldn't become too romantic. Late also provided everyone with comfortable mattresses, knowing it was what they were accustomed to. Afterward, Russell loaded the cart full of mattresses and made his way back to the royal palace. Meanwhile, Late had grand plans to bring an end to the evil god Masurazul. With time still on his side, he intended to use it wisely to enhance his gear. However, he chose to move cautiously, carefully putting his plans into motion.